All right. I think we are live. I'm State Representative Paul Baumbach. With me is Representative Cyndie Romer and her dog, and Senator Dave Sokola. And his dog is not he's not speaking up yet this morning. And my aide Emmy Diaz is also here. We're going to have a guest later on. Right, we lost Cyndie for a minute. My guess is she will come back in. Dave, any opening comments? Any things you want to start with?
Sure. I obviously we're back in session after the 5-week break for joint finance budget hearings with all the agencies. That went reasonably well. One of the issues that came up over the break was the lawsuit involving unclaimed property in the state of Delaware. What was not said in the articles that I read, and I don't think I read everything that came out, but this lawsuit was filed in 2016, and the Carney administration has been putting in escrow all of the money that comes from the money order part of our unclaimed property. So the part that was in dispute in the lawsuit, we have not been using as revenue. We've been keeping it in a separate fund. We don't know how we know we lost the lawsuit. We know going forward, we will not be able to collect this money. The courts have not told us exactly how they're going to address money going back. Pretty much the standard is from the lawsuit date forward or from a few years back from the lawsuit when the contesting part of this, we were originally, and likely at this point, there's going to be some sort of a negotiated settlement, but there's not an urgent loss of revenue as a result of the case that was just decided a week or so ago. So we'll get to that if there's any questions later, but unclaimed property has been as much as 13% of the revenue stream. Right now, it's around 6%. And this subset of unclaimed property is about 10% of the unclaimed property. So, 0.6% of our revenue. And of course, we haven't been using it as revenue for the last 6 years. So it's bad news, but it was a declining source of revenue anyhow. And hopefully we'll go forward and use more steady sources of income for our state budget. The last week in March or the first week in April is when we will see the hot mix plants open. To the extent there's patching going on now, it's cold mix that they're using, and that is generally temporary. The freeze thaw cycles have caused some damage to roads, obviously, and we're getting calls and we're trying to respond to those. And don't hesitate to contact my office if you need a pothole filled. But the better work will be done once the hot mix plants reopen. There are 3 constitutional amendments in the Senate Executive Committee this week. These are second legs of the constitutional amendments, and the first legs passed overwhelmingly, if not unanimously, last year. And I can go through those in order if you like. The first one, Senate Bill 38, relates to notice. And there's archaic language in the state constitution that there have been Supreme Court opinions ruled that it's not appropriate. It used to be you had to notice 3 months before a new General Assembly. So it passes in one General Assembly. Before it can go to a ballot in the next General Assembly, you must have a 3-month notice in 3 newspapers published in each county or something like that is the language. And there aren't 3 newspapers necessarily published in each county anymore. So that has been already ruled like a little bit from the past, and what this language does is it updates it. It still requires for notice. It adds electronic notification as an option, and it's more in line with the 21st century. The second one is around something that I've been bugging for a change for 30 years. And it's the one that allows us to call ourselves back into session. The previous language in the Constitution says, and I'm going to read it, the General Assembly may continue in session each calendar year so long as in its judgment the public interest may require. However, each session shall not extend beyond the last day of June. Okay, and then it says, unless the session is recalled by the governor or the mutual call of the presiding officers of both houses. And so what that meant is if we recessed before midnight on June 30th, we could not call ourselves back into session. And so we always went after midnight, and then we would be in compliance with that language because we would be in the next session of the General Assembly. What we did is we changed it may not extend beyond 5 p.m. on the last day of June. And so all we have to do now is work till 5:01 on the last day of June, and we can still call ourselves into session. This is a little bit of a, there's been kind of a tradition of working beyond midnight on June 30th. It causes a lot of backlogs. It is a safety issue that we believe, and there's data to back that up. There is one accident that I'm aware of that occurred as a result of, fatigue, and we know that the people like Ken Grant and the others who've always talked to us about highway safety always have thought that that's not a good idea. So this will be the second leg. Once we do that, we won't have to stay in after midnight on June 30th. The third one is a very nuanced one that deals with a lot of stuff that has changed in the way things have been practiced. It's Senate Bill 41. I would encourage people to look at it if you are having insomnia, because it's not a very exciting one, but it basically updates the Constitution to what current practice is around a number of things, including the state treasurer, the Office of Management and Budget, the auditor, and things like that. So it basically also moves us, to the 21st century. So those are the things that we're working on this week. And I've already assigned House Bill 1 to the Health Committee, which is planning on meeting next Wednesday. That will start at 10 in the morning. It will be hybrid format, so anyone can watch the...
Senator, House Bill 1 is?
House Bill 1 is the recreational use of marijuana bill that passed the House yesterday, 28-13. And some of us have been working on that for a long time, and we would like to get that to the governor sooner rather than later. So that's pretty much what I have. If there are questions later on, I'll still be here. So
thank you, Dave. Cyndie, welcome.
Hi.
Any opening updates you'd like to share?
In the 25th district, so I've been working on, I just had my first bill heard out of committee, which is to expand supplemental and diagnostic screenings for breast cancer. So that passed unanimously out of committee yesterday. So hopefully we'll be on the floor soon. And I've been working a lot on a bill for to increase protections for victims of domestic violence. And then other than that, really been doing a lot of constituent work. So one of the things that has happened is community cleanup has some of those monies that used to be under the county are now under the state for some of the community cleanup, for the tipping fees, for the big dumpsters that come out for some of the communities. So we've been working with neighborhoods to schedule those types of things for the spring. I've been working with Valerie George at County Council, who I think a lot of people know in the district. She was the former aide of Dave Tackett and is a wealth of information. So really partnering up with her to work through constituent issues together so that we can basically break down the barriers, whether they're at the county level or at the state level. And then there are some discussions going on my Facebook page because there are 2 Wawas that are trying to be opened up on 896, one including a drive-through Wawa. So while we don't have anything to do with that from a zoning perspective or giving them a license to build there or anything. Just trying to pay attention to all the things going on in the actual district. So.
And Representative Romer, you also have your own constituent coffee. When and where is that?
I do. It's the last Tuesday of the month at 8 a.m. It is at the Food Bank of Delaware, which is in the Pencader Commons or Pencader Commons, I think it is.
Corporate Center, maybe?
Corporate, yeah. 220 Lake Drive. And yeah, we'd love to see people out. People come
And that's
out.
at the cafe, is that correct?
Yeah, the Food Bank has a great cafe, and it's staffed, and all the food is made by the culinary students that are in the culinary program at the food bank. So I always leave with my lunch as well. Buy a couple things there. It's really awesome. So I encourage people to come by, stop by the cafe anyway. It's a great location in the district.
That's great. Thanks, Cindy. In order to try to keep up with the senator, I have to mention House Bill 77, which is the second leg of a constitutional amendment. That it sounds silly, but it requires that elected officials, members of the General Assembly, live in the districts that they serve. For whatever reason, our laws are very clear that when you run for office, you must live in the district that you would be serving. But the day after the election, you can move to downtown Dover and have a much shorter commute. And while that may be attractive, it is currently legal, but it won't be when we pass the second leg of House Bill 77. So I'm looking forward. It's I have to say it's the first constitutional amendment I've led, and I was very confused of why the governor didn't sign my bill last session. Well, it's because constitutional amendments don't get signed by governors; they just get passed by the General Assembly 2 successive sessions if you are successful. So I'm looking forward to that. I've got 2 bills in committee today. One's on reimbursement of training when one police agency hires a police officer from another agency where the first agency paid for their training. So we've got it in the current note. As of last year, you would pay for the if they left within the first 2 years they started. That bill was passed to make that 4 years. However, it was not really clear when that clock started and stopped. So it's a clarification bill that we're putting in there now. And the second is for manufactured housing, which is an area I used to chair when we had a manufactured housing committee. There's something called the Relocation Authority. So when a community, manufactured housing community, you can think mobile homes, but they're known as manufactured homes now. When one of those communities shuts down, the state has a fund where money is accumulated to help those homeowners either move their homes to a different community or purchase a home in a different community if their home isn't movable. We have a board that oversees that and that is responsible for the divvying up those dollars, and they work hard. And right now, and they come from across the state because we've got communities across the state, there's no compensation for them. So the second bill I have will add $100 per month stipend for any month that a board member attends a meeting. So those are the ones that I've got this week. Look, I've got several in the hopper. Very excited about that. I had one person ask about End of Life Options Act, which I've worked on for a good number of years. And we have it's in process, and the strategy is not yet set as far as when we introduce it, where we introduce it, how we introduce it. The bill's the same. We're just trying to get more and more members, representatives and senators on the bill and then figuring out its path forward. So very active in discussions, but it's not active in filing yet. So that will come in time. So I think there may be, was there one more? Sorry, I have to check my messages. Okay, what was the second question? How are electric vehicles charged road tax? We're going to have a guest on later in this call, and to address I think it's called Advancing Clean Cars, the ACC. Is Advancing correct? But we'll have somebody from Sierra Club, Dustyn Thompson, who can talk all about EVs. I can strive to field this, but I think it's better to get a more informed person on that question. Connection is flaky. Pam points that out. I'm not sure what I know. I know both Cindy and Dave popped out. I'm hoping that wasn't on my front. I'm hosting this. And Cindy, who's more tech savvy than probably the three of us, is shaking her head. So my guess is she's got a good connection there. So it's probably in my set. And I want to thank everyone, both viewers and participants in this, for joining this virtual one. As I've been whining for a while, I had surgery, so it's not that I'm homebound, but getting to the Deer Park and to the second floor and back, and then down to Dover when I can't drive and I use a sort of a walker to get around, would be a little bit more than I was ready to sign up for this week. So we'll be back in person next month. And back to normal. But I appreciate everyone's adjustments. Good. James points out that his connection is good there. If there's any questions, please type them in. We will try to field them. I want to talk a little bit about both, let's say, communities that are new to elected officials. So when you've got a new representative like Representative Romer, every community is new to Representative Romer. So there's a process of meeting all the communities, trying to be connected to them. And then when we have an every 10-year redistricting, we often have changes within a district. 11 years ago, Senator Sokola had about half of his district changed out from under him. So had to meet a lot of new communities. And then in this cycle, because the 23rd House district had the lowest population during the census, it expanded the most of all the House districts. We added something like 14 communities, most of them up in the Pike Creek area. So we've been introducing ourselves. And one of the things I point out when people reach out is that, please have our connection. You've got a senator and you've got a representative, especially if you're in an HOA, especially if you're on the board of an HOA. Please make sure you know who they are, reach out to them. And it's not that you need to have a weekly conversation with them, but if you ever have an issue, reach out to us. You don't need to worry about, is this a city, a county, a state, a federal issue? Reach out to us, say, this is the issue we have. We'll try to connect you to where we can get an answer for you. We had one community reach out to us recently, and they wanted to know how we're going to be addressing the community roads, which need some serious milling and repaving. They had some maintenance issues on sidewalks. There's one which has an issue of just being able to get out onto Paper Mill Road with the morning traffic. So there's things where we can reach out to DelDOT, reach out to wherever it happens to be, try to get a good answer, get your problem raised to the right level. So if you can help us help you, we would love that. Cindy, do you want to talk about maybe your initial community outreach and experiences? As soon as you unmute. I'm going to take back that Cindy's the most experienced of the four of us.
I was watching it on Facebook. Anyway, it's so yeah. I mean, I love the HOA meetings because it's such a great way to see a lot of people, and sometimes they answer it. It builds their community too. Sometimes they answer each other's questions. We had really great sessions where we had their property manager on. We had like I said, Valerie George from County Council. We had, so my district is split between Senator Sokola and Senator Townsend. This particular meeting had Senator Townsend on it. And we just are able to clear up a lot of things. Like all minds are, stronger together. So it's a great way to meet people. They let you know the things that are going on in their community, whether they have a community cleanup, things that they might not know that we can even help with. One of the things it had something to do with a sign at the front of their development. They don't even necessarily know that, that could be something that state or county could help them with. So that's been really helpful. It's also really helpful to get to know their property managers because they get a lot of the feedback before we will. So they're able to help us. Also, county police joins those calls. At least the HOAs I've been in, they have county police involved as well. We have a neighborhood that's going to have potentially some redevelopment, and we're going to help kind of facilitate conversations between them and the new builders. So there's a lot that we can do. Again, even though I don't have anything to do with zoning and whether that development can be built, we can help facilitate those conversations and get Del Dot or Denrec or whoever needs to be on the call to answer the questions for the homeowners. It's been a learning experience for me. It's been really, really great. I've learned a lot of information. And it honestly, it makes our jobs easier because then we're more in tune to what's really going on in the neighborhoods. And this neighborhood may have different concerns than this neighborhood has. This one may be more concerned with snow removal. This one might be more concerned with crime. This one might be near a commercial district. This one's near the university. So every neighborhood's going to have unique concerns. And so, yeah, if your HOA is having a meeting, especially the ones we've been invited to seem to be annual. So it's not a huge ask. And now they're on Zoom. So it's really nice. It's a great way for us to be in touch. So I've enjoyed the meetings.
That's great. Senator Sokola, I know that Cyndie is a gun sense. She's not only a candidate, there's a higher level person, but as the top Senate leader, can you talk about the status of gun sense legislation that's in the pipeline this year or is hoped for this year, or this session, I should say?
I can talk in real general terms that we've been working with the House and the administration leadership to try to figure out what priorities there should be and who's going to lead which bills. And I don't have off the top of my head the specifics of who's doing what, but I do know that Senator Lockman was discussing the possibility of making some minor changes to the permit to purchase piece of legislation before moving that one forward. That was last year SB 3. I believe it's going to be SB 3 again. And there's a little interesting thing about that. We give senators the Senate bill with their district number, and she Senate District 3. So that she could put whatever bill she wants in Senate Bill 3, and I think she's going to use that number for the permit to purchase again. It's a high priority bill for a lot of us. The data is pretty overwhelming. One of the best examples is what was it? Connecticut did a permit to purchase after Sandy Hook, and they had some data that went way down, especially suicides, by the way. It's a bill that it's a policy, a practice that really puts a dent in those crimes of passion that are all too common in our society. Missouri got rid of theirs a decade or so ago, and they spiked up in a number of areas, including gun trafficking to adjacent states. So, we just have so much data about it. It should be national, but we're picking off, a state here and there at a time, and hopefully, we'll get more of that across the country over time. But we passed the Senate last time.
Dave, I'm going to jump in for just a sec because we haven't run with 5 people before. If you're not speaking, if you can mute, I think that might be helpful. And then go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. So yeah, that worked. So that's really pretty much all I have about that. So we expect the late March or April timeframe, I believe, for that bill.
And Dave, I'm going to lean on you also because you've got more history than we do. There's been questions about the cost of natural gas. I know that I've had several constituents reach out about jumps in their energy costs. And Lou points out that the cost of natural gas that's charged to consumers has about doubled over the past year. And while natural gas prices spiked, they've fallen back down, but the price being charged by the utilities hasn't spiked down. I assume that goes to the PSC for rate increases, and it doesn't automatically come down when the market price comes down, but rather it has to wait for an application, and Dustyn may also be able to weigh in on this. But can you perhaps help people understand what to expect in the rate that they pay for natural gas coming up, and what the likely progression is should natural gas prices stay down at their post-peak level as they are right now?
This is one of those commodities that is impacted by things like international pressures. And Obviously, what's going on in Europe over the last year or so is troubling in many ways, but it also has economic instability components to it, and natural gas is one of those things that is particularly susceptible to those kinds of instabilities. I believe it does go for approval to the Public Service Commission, and when the rates are approved, they're approved for a period of time, and it's kind of regardless of what if there's a price increase after a rate's improved, it or increased, it has to stay at that increased level until the next time frame. And I'm not sure if I think under certain circumstances you can go up or down in a shorter time frame, but I'm not as familiar with the Public Service Commission process. So Dustyn may be better able to answer that, because I know he's been involved in some of the things go before the PSC.
So that is a perfect segue to our additional guest, Dustyn Thompson from the Sierra Club of Delaware. I know that I've had a constituent share with me a pseudo newspaper where it's fairly one-sided and written by some legislative colleagues as opposed to journalists, and regarding electric vehicle policy, the clean car efforts, and however, Dustyn, we as legislators are jack of all trades and masters of none. I think you're pretty much a good master of what's going on in the EV world, in the clean car world. Can you update us and those who are online and who will see this afterwards about what's going on in Delaware, and maybe do a little bit of myth busting along the way, if you could?
Yeah, sounds good. Just to pick up on what Dave was laying down on the natural gas side, real quick. So the Chesapeake Utilities, I believe it was, it may have been Delmarva, but one of the natural gas providers did go through the Public Service Commission to get a 25% increase for natural gas rates. And part of that, though, so you have, supply rates for natural gas, which are impacted heavily by, the price of natural gas. Obviously, if they charge utilities more for the product, then you're going to be charged more as a consumer. But we're, depending on how you look at it, in my worldview, unfortunately, expanding our natural gas infrastructure throughout Delaware in a rather unprecedented rate. And so that's a lot of costs to the utilities that are doing that expansion. And so they recoup that through rates, right? And so they also asked for increases to recoup the cost of expanding natural gas infrastructure, particularly in areas that are under heavy development, but also, houses like mine don't have natural gas. It was built before natural gas was a thing. And the previous owner who lived here for a long time felt no need to have natural gas. Neither do I. So I still don't have a natural gas line. But, there's been an increasing push to get natural gas to every house for one reason or another. From builders to HVAC installers to the utilities doing outreach themselves, professing that it's safe or clean or whatever the flavor of the month is. But I will just pontificate for like one iota of a second that Energize Delaware, the Infrastructure Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and I go on record, I did not choose that name, all have a lot of money for residents to get off of natural gas. So my house, like I said, does not have natural gas. We use induction for cooking, which I understand is an investment, but I encourage folks to check it out and to rethink about electric cooktops as well. They've come a long, long way. Induction's the future, but electric is much improved. And we run mini splits for our heating and cooling in each room. So we're able to save a ton of money by not cooling or heating rooms that we're not going to be in for the majority of the day, and just keeping them at a consistent temperature. And you can get huge rebates through Energize Delaware and the IRA for things like mini splits, induction stoves, heat pump hot water heaters, all these things that will make it so you don't have to worry about the price of natural gas, which will increase in volatility over time because it has historically, and it will continue to do so. So just to throw that plug out there. So EVs. So thanks, Paul and Dave and Cyndie for inviting me on. Emmy, good to see you again. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity to come on and talk about this. And Paul, that was the nicest way to put that publication that we've all seen in my ear. I live like a minute away from the state Republican Party's headquarters, so they're like all over the place up here. But you know, the front line of that pseudo newspaper, we'll stick with that, is that 35% of Delawareans are going to be forced to buy EVs in 2026. And then throughout the paper that we're going to ban, you know, Delaware is going to ban gas cars, and you have to buy an EV. You're going to be forced to buy an EV in replacement. And I don't know really how the reality of this came about, because it's just not real. First, it's not practical, right? Like, how would we ban gas cars physically? Like, how to ban something makes it illegal to own, right? So that entices images of folks coming to take your cars away, or that it's going to be illegal to buy one or illegal to register one. They've even used that language, that it'll be illegal to buy or register a gas car. And it's just not true. I don't know, honestly, where it's coming from. I've read the program in and out every way from Sunday. It doesn't even mention registering cars. It doesn't even mention buying cars, because it doesn't have anything to do with registering or buying cars, in the sense that it's not a consumer program. It's a program for automakers. So let's start at the beginning, right? The Advanced Clean Cars program has been around for a long time. This is the second rendition of it. Delaware actually joined the Advanced Clean Cars 1 program to an extent, right? We joined, as did Pennsylvania, the low emission vehicle portion of that program. We did not join, Pennsylvania and Delaware, the only 2 states out of the 17 states and territories that joined ACC 1, ACC being Advanced Clean Cars. So I'll say ACC, it means Advanced Clean Cars. It's just a lot easier to say. So there were 17 states and territories that joined the first version. Us in Pennsylvania were the only ones that didn't join the full version, right? We only adopted the low emission vehicles portion. And I grew up in Western Pennsylvania. I do not aspire Delaware to be Pennsylvania. I feel like we probably all share that sentiment in this room. But point being, all the other states are now in the same boat as Delaware, right? That now that the program has changed, we have to decide, do we want to adopt the new version, right, or not? And thus far, every state that was on 1 is in the process of adopting 2. Everybody's kind of reviewing it. 7 states or territories have formally adopted. They're done. It's on the books. Virginia, I think, was the most recent one to do it. So all the states around us are either in process or have already adopted the second portion, right? Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia. Again, Pennsylvania's reviewing. New York, on up the East Coast, they're working on it. Vermont adopted it already, but the rest are in review. And so we're one of the last states in the region to really get going into the process. It's made a lot of headlines, but the process actually hasn't started yet. We had workshops on it, but it hasn't started the public, regulatory process. And so what this program does, it doesn't tell you what you have to buy, right? What it does is tell automakers that what they have to ship into Delaware to be available on the lot, right? And so I, at this point, have to remind you, if you've watched either of the last 2 Super Bowls, you are full and well aware that pretty much every major automaker except Toyota has now made a commitment that they will only exclusively produce electric vehicles or clean options like plug-in hybrids, electric vehicles, hydrogen cars at 2030 or 2035, right? So that's just the market, right? That's what's going to happen because the entirety of the European Union has made that law, right? A lot of states in the US, California, the largest economy in the US, one of the largest in the world, has already, they're done. They've said that. Canada has said that, right? Like the whole market is shifting that direction. Automakers know that, right? Which is why they're not against this rule. The people this actually affects, right? Automakers are not against this. They're supportive of this because they know that we're going that direction anyway. And
Dustyn, can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Can you describe the types of vehicles this applies to? This isn't tractor trailers and farm vehicles and things like that.
No, this is only, trucks, like regular, like a pickup truck or SUVs, cars. This is what's called the passenger fleet, right? So it's not school buses. So the email that some folks got with a picture of may I remind you, diesel school bus on fire, right? It's not having anything to do with school buses, no farm equipment, no tractor trailers. There's another rule that California has around, tractor trailers and semi trucks and all that, but we're not even talking about that here. I think California is one of the only ones that has that. And the reason California is able to do this, and we are not, we cannot write our own rules, right? Some folks have suggested Delaware should write their own rules. We can't. The federal law, the Clean Air Act, allows California to set their own standards and allows states to choose whether they would like to follow those standards. Those standards are called the Advanced Clean Car Standards. And so if this goes through, right, what changes? For most people, nothing. If you want an EV, like if right now, if you want to go buy an EV, right, and some of us on the call have them, good luck, right, in terms of buying it in Delaware. Now, if you go one of these other ACC, Advanced Clean Cars, states around us, people that have adopted the program, relatively easy to find an EV because automakers know that that's where they have to send them, right? Because they're in this program. And so that's where they go. And so I bought mine almost in New York, right? Northern New Jersey. If you're, own Tesla, you can just buy them offline, but you don't get the advantage of test driving them. But if you want to test drive one in Delaware, good luck. So that's what will change, right? We, in joining this program, will get these clean options, plug-in hybrids, EVs, someday hydrogen cars, if that technology pans out, shipped to Delaware so you can go test drive them on the lot and purchase them if you would like, right? That is what changes. The market has decided that by 2035, that's going to be the option, right? That new gas car production is all but going to stop. Automakers have made that decision, not Delaware, not California, right? Automakers have made that decision. Now, part of that is world pressure, but they've made that investment. And if you read the news coming out of the automakers, you'll find that it's cheaper to do, it's easier to do, it's safer to do. They actually are very pleased with this transition and how it's going. So it's not going to unwind itself whether or not we adopt this program. The question is, do we want that as an option on the lot when we want to go test drive a car? That's it, right? If we don't join the program, our ground level, right? I'm not talking atmospheric pollution right now. Our ground level pollution, the pollution that folks that are surrounded by interstates and highways and roadways in the cities, in the suburbs, right around 95, 495, they will continue to suffer poor air quality and have higher rates of asthma than their counterparts away from those transit corridors, right? Because particulate matter is a huge cause of health-related air pollution problems. That particulate matter comes from tailpipes. And so by transitioning and getting that as an option for more people to purchase, right? And a recent poll that came out recently in Delaware, it was a poll in Delaware, it came out that around 34% of Delawareans polled said that they are very likely or somewhat likely to buy an EV in the next 5 years. Well, what luck, because that's about the percentage of EVs and clean cars that will then be available at that time, right? So it works out pretty good. We have a match of supply and demand, where right now we have higher demand, no supply, because we're not in the program, right? So if we can get those folks those options, then our air pollution on the ground level in these communities will come down, right? Which is a huge benefit to our state and to those residents and healthcare costs and healthcare related issues. And we're not hurting anybody, right? Like, this is not telling you you can't register a car. You can still buy, it doesn't affect used cars at all. And most Delawareans buy used cars. So most Delawareans are completely unaffected, right? It just impacts folks that want to buy new cars, that want this option. And that's it. It's not a mandate for you to go out and buy anything. It's not a mandate or a ban that you can't own your gas car. You can't go buy your used gas car at any time ever, right? Or that you can't buy a new gas car until the market's already decided that that's not really going to be a viable option anymore. So it's just political noise, Paul, and it's working, unfortunately, and getting people riled up. And this is the hill that some legislators and officials seem to want to die on, but it's just noise. It's not reality.
So they're not coming for my gas stove. Is that correct?
I assure you, I can say with 1,000% certainty that this has absolutely nothing to do with your gas stove.
That sounds good. Well, among other things, I don't have a gas stove, but if I did, I'd be worried about the barbarians coming to the door and taking away my gas stove. Thank you for that. There was a question before you got into this regarding with this nationwide and probably global wide shift towards EVs. Is there insight into how states like Delaware and the feds are going to be funding our roads and our governments, where in the past we've been pretty reliant on gas taxes?
Yes. So there's a lot of, what's the best word? Different states are trying different mechanisms. So the whole, one of the founding principles of this country and the way we are divided into states is that we are laboratories of experiments, right? That's not my terminology. That's right. That's taught in school, right? I feel like everybody kind of has heard that before. That's what's happening, right? So states are handling that in very, very different ways. So some are doing just a flat kind of rate. When you register your car, you pay a flat rate. You don't pay, gas taxes at all. That seems to be kind of the most prevalent, is that folks that have an EV, as we make this shift to more EVs, folks that have the EVs will pay this kind of flat rate that would be more or less about what you would have paid throughout the year for filling up the gas tank.
Cyndie, do you have any questions for Dustyn or any comments to share?
No, I just thank you. And I said this when you gave us a legislative presentation as well. I thank you for putting out the information that combats the disinformation, because and the specific ask that you had of us to disseminate that, because in our everyday conversations with people, we just need to keep reiterating what it is and what it isn't. So and I appreciate the perspective that you're saying it's happening. It's happening regardless. This isn't a Delaware initiative. This is also coming from the automakers, and that, we can either be part of it or not. And it's better that we be part of it, and that we modernize and we move along with the industry. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's certainly within our own self-interest. And Paul, if I could just talk about one other thing that I know folks have a lot of fear about. And
I was going to also ask you to talk about how this impacts lower income households.
I'll throw that in.
Okay.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest fears is infrastructure, right? The other is state spending an inordinate amount of money on this, right? People feel that there's higher priorities than this, right? which I'm not going to argue with you about that. We should end childhood hunger. Yes. But that is one other reason why we need to do this, right? So if we don't do this, we don't get the EVs. What we also don't get is infrastructure. The states that have adopted this program has seen an inordinately higher amount of money from private companies being invested in their state in infrastructure. Why? Because they know that the EVs are there, so people will use the infrastructure, right? Delaware has used Volkswagen settlement funds to build charging stations, but because we don't have a proliferation of EVs being afforded as an option in Delaware, those chargers are not used as often. And so when they break, they're less likely to want to fix them with their private money because folks aren't using them, right? So it's also about infrastructure build out. Now we are using federal funding. We're using the Volkswagen funding. By next year, right, we have roughly around 80 rapid chargers right now. There's a ton of level 2 chargers, the ones we have like in our house, Paul. But the rapid ones that you see as kind of the gas station alternative, we have about 80 of them right now, ports. So a good chunk of them are Tesla, but Tesla is now opening them up to other cars. So you'll be able to use those soon. So we're getting ready to add this year another 36 of them. And then by the end of next year, through the federal infrastructure bill, we're going to add 24 stations. Each of those stations have to have at least 4+ ports. So humongous build out in 2 years. That's without private investment. If we join this program, we also can, boom, add on the private investment as well. And that's really important for the low income community. People who are low income tend to live in apartment buildings. They tend to rent predominantly townhouses without driveways. This is my first house with a driveway actually here. It was a pain having an EV with street parking because it took a good amount to be able to install a charger. Now, luckily my dad's an electrician and was able to help me, but that's not the case for most folks, right? So we have to have public infrastructure for those that don't have access to those level 2 chargers. Now we're working on policies to make sure that rental properties, apartment complexes, the big ones, right? They have a certain number of chargers available for their residents because we know this is an issue. But that public charging station, that public network is going to be really important for those folks who can't install or don't want to install a level 2 charger at their house. We're working on other programs, particularly for street parking, to make sure that folks have access. And we're working on grants with some nonprofits to make sure that costs can be covered for low income folks to install street parking charging stations. As I said, they're a little bit more expensive than if you have a driveway like I do. So we're working on the charging issue, but the fact of the matter is you are talking about a very, very long time in our kind of perception of time before the market is such that low income folks are going to buy EVs. And that's just a facet of low income folks don't buy new cars. They buy used cars. Again, this program has nothing to do with used cars. And so by virtue of fact, right, it's not going to impact low income folks because it's not about what they're buying. It's not about used cars. Now, eventually,
Dustyn, I thought there was a rebate for used EV purchases. Is that not correct?
There is, but there's not a huge used EV market. That's what I was getting ready to get to. Now, later down the road, right, we will have a used EV market, right? Like most people hold on to their EVs for dear life in Delaware because it's really difficult to buy one. Now, when that changes and they become more available, then maybe people will start buying newer ones and trade in their used ones. And then those become available for folks that buy used cars, which is most Delawareans, including low income folks. And so then, right, that program kicks in. The federal government gives at the point of sale $4,000 off the cost of a used EV. We're pushing Delaware to do, something, kick in a little bit too. Right now, Delaware kicks in $2,500 for new EVs. We're hoping that we can kick in, that or more for used, particularly for low income families. But again, the horizon on the used market is years down the road, for better or worse, however you want to look at that. It would be lovely to have a more robust used market. It just, unfortunately, is not reality yet. But I will say that these cars are outlasting gas cars, and the batteries, I know everybody's upset about the batteries, even though I'm pretty sure that some of us are on a laptop or a cell phone here, which are powered by the same batteries, but nobody cares about that. But whatever. Point being, the batteries outlast the car. So the lovely thing about this is now some of the original, like really early EV cars are now coming offline. They've lasted 20 years or so, 15 years. Now people are buying another one, because that's what folks do with whatever car they get, gas or EV. Those cars, particularly in Europe, are now being built into what are called gigawatt factories and are helping with grid resiliency, which I know and other people are concerned about. So even though the battery is not great for long hauls down a highway, it's wonderful for that. I need a lot of power right now on the grid, right? That peak time. That right now we burn natural gas for that. Well, other countries are using EV batteries for it. So, I know folks are concerned about the batteries too. They outlast the cars and have a whole nother life ahead of them once they're done being used on the road.
Senator Sokola, do you have any questions or comments?
I think that's a very good summary of what we need to know about the EV matter, and I really appreciate all the work that Dustyn's doing and his willingness to be available to us and other groups and civic groups to make sure people are understanding of what's going on.
Great. So Dustyn, there's a question from Frank Burns regarding jobs, and I think that one of the louder groups of opposition is the car dealers and the car repair locations. And I'm going to say it's a good news, bad news, in that in likelihood there will be a reduction of jobs in the auto repair area. That's the bad news. The good news is those who own EVs aren't sending their cars to the repair shop anywhere near as often as those with traditional cars with internal combustion engines. Any reflections on that claim / observation? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first I would say that we haven't really heard a lot of opposition from dealerships. We've actually had quite a few dealerships reach out to us to say thank you for what you're doing, because they have to turn customers away. They don't have EVs. They're not going to get EVs. And so they can't help them. So this work is going to help those folks. And they've several have reached out to thank us. You're welcome if you're watching. So on terms of the car repair shops aren't going away. Now, they have changed over time. They will continue to change over time. But the fact is that there will be gas cars on the road for better or worse, right? I know what your worldview is, long time. And so, DENREC's own projections, even California's projections, right, shows that well past 2050, there are gas cars on the road in some numbers. And so those repair shops will have work for quite a long time to come. So certainly not at 2035, we're going to see a huge shutdown of repair shops, or definitely not any time prior to that. Because again, there's still a lot of used cars on the road, and there's still between now and 2035, when the automakers have said we're not making them anymore. Now, most of them have already said we're no longer making new models, like GM's, like we're done. We're only going to make new, the gas ones that are out there. We'll keep making those types of cars, Chevy Equinox or whatever, right? But we're not going to make like a new model anymore. So they'll continue to pump those out until they say, you know what, we're done, whenever that is. Definitely 2035, according to GM, but it may be sooner, they've said. So between now and then, all those cars will become used cars, right? And they'll need fixing and all that. But yeah, electric cars don't really, there are very few parts on it. So they don't really break down that often. So I hear the concern, but you're talking about a very long time away from now when markets will ultimately be dictating it regardless.
So, Dustyn, there was this segment on Saturday Night Live a long, long time ago with John Lovett, and it was Plug Away. Other than EV policy, can you plug away at Sierra Club of Delaware's top priority again, other than EV policy?
Yeah, certainly educating folks on this, of course. But in addition to this, we are working on energy. We work on energy and climate policy predominantly. You know, we work to support our partners and allies in conservation work. We look to help our environmental justice communities on whatever fight that they're fighting. That I'm not going to announce all that to the world because that's not my job, or that's not my point. That's not where I should be as an ally, right? But we look to help them. But our other big priority is the climate bill. You know, we had a really good bill last year, the Climate Change Solutions Act. You know, I said that we're the last state in the region to do this, the clean car stuff. We're also the last state in the region, aside from Pennsylvania again, to have any climate goals on the books. You know, the majority of states have climate goals. Even Republican states have climate goals on the books and have had them since about 2005 to 2007, when we had a huge surge in emissions in the United States at 2005. And so all these states were like, oh my God, we got to do something about it. And so they said, we're going to reduce our emissions, right? We're going to put it in a law. We're going to set goals and we're going to work towards it. And you've seen all these states do huge things. Virginia, right? Huge Climate Jobs Act. Maryland, same thing. Jersey, same thing. You know, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, all these states, right? Washington. They've all done huge investments in jobs to help reduce emissions. And what's Delaware done, right? Not a whole lot in that scale. And that's because we don't have any goals on the books. We don't have any marching orders to beat the drum to. And so, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get goals on the books, make sure that agencies understand climate change and how what they're doing impacts our emissions, right? We're trying to reduce our reliance on the coal plants to our west that are polluting the entire region, right? A lot of folks pontificate, and I've seen articles recently from the Republican caucus that they've put out that said, John Carney said that our air pollution comes from these coal power plants to the west. Well, first off, air pollution, atmospheric and ground level is different. But that being said, who's buying that power? We are. So that's because we're not thinking about our emissions, right? We don't have to consider it. It's not on the law. It's actually some agencies, and this is wild, in Delaware are prohibited from thinking about climate change and emissions. That's crazy, right? Like, you think about that in like real far right states, that's here, right? So in that scenario, this is what we have. We're contributing in a huge way to the regional greenhouse gas emissions because we're not thinking about it. And so that's what we're trying to do. It seems like common sense, but again, people just go off the rails and people stoke the flames of division and try to make it into this huge thing that it's really not, just like what's happening with EVs. So that's our other big thing, is making sure folks understand what we're trying to do here on climate, which is not monumental, but it's something that has to be done.
Dustyn, thank you very much. Cyndie or Dave, any final questions for Dustyn?
No. There was a question in the chat. Something about any way we can introduce electric car rebates for low income. Do we know anything about that, or are the rebates, are there income based rebates at all in other states that you know of? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so a lot of states have really robust rebates for low-income folks buying newer used cars, but those are states that had joined the first rendition of the program. So there's a market for used EVs and a market for new EVs that we just, like I said, we just don't have. We're not going to have for a while. So you can give folks, right? It's $7,500 for new cars and $2,500 from the state, 75 from the federal government, 25 from the state. But they don't buy new cars, right? So that's not really going to help. So what we're working on is to supplement the Inflation Reduction Act, $4,000 for used EVs, and be ready that when we have that used EV market, that we will have a program that we can add dollars to that to bring the cost even further down. By that time, price parity we know it's already being achieved in a lot of the newer models. We will know certainly that it will be achieved by the time there's a used market in Delaware. And so we just need to be ready. So yeah, we're working on it, but all the states that are in that program generally have a point of sale, right, used rebate for low income families.
Dustyn, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I've put in the link to the Delaware chapter of the Sierra Club in the comments. People can reach out and learn more and get connected.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. If I could just
Please.
ask for folks that are on the call, look, the opposition have folks riled up. Y'all know, right? You've seen it. You've been getting the calls, right? Hopefully this helps maybe. But it's noise and it's working. And it's working that they're contacting DNRAC and saying, don't you dare take my gas car away, right? Whatever. So if folks could be encouraged to reach out to DNRAC, there's a guy, Kyle Crawl at DNRAC, that he's collecting all these. There's an email on our website of how you can submit comments to DNRAC saying like, hey, we know the reality of the situation and we're all about it. We're supportive of it. So Sierra Club homepage that Paul put in there, it's right at the top. There's a button you can click to submit a comment.
Thank you very much, Dustyn. I'm going to drop you out of here. I appreciate your time, really do. So there's a question from Pam about the weight of EVs and tire wear, and I can say, because my EV right now is getting some new tires, that indeed EVs are often heavier than a traditional car, and they go through tires a little faster. Also, because of their design, they've got faster and higher torque if you do a jackrabbit start, so you can go through tires faster. But as a result of the market, you end up with there's now EV rated tires. So there's tires that are manufactured specifically for the uniqueness of electric vehicles. So I just learned that this month. So as Dustyn has pointed out, the market adapts, and with the sharp growth in EV usage in our country, the manufacturers have made those adjustments. So that is we're going there. Dave, is there something you want to speak about at this time?
Yeah, I didn't mention, but at the very northern part of the new 23rd Rep District, there is some Delmarva Power ongoing activity. It's off of Crossan Road. It's primarily to service the community of Stirrup Farms, which is not, it's across the street from the 23rd Rep District, I believe. But you will see some activity from Delmarva Power, including at least one new utility pole and a lot of underground conduit work that will be going on in that area. It may affect traffic a little bit off of Crossan Road. Not a lot of people use that road, but those who use it know where it is and might want to avoid it.
So Cyndie, I know that finally the Otts Chapel Bridge over 95 has been reopened. Are there other notable construction areas, either current or imminent, in the 25th district?
There is the work that's being done on the 896-95 portion. And I do know that DelDOT also has a project that is going to be happening at Route 40 and 896, but they've purposely staggered it so that we don't have major construction going on in the same strip. So I can share the project update for that. We did talk to in our last homeowners association meeting about that. DelDOT does a really good job of having basically a page for each project that they have going on. That's a major project. So I can put that in the chat. They're still in the planning stages and also just doing some of the prep for the land. So people will see right around 896. I'm sure they've seen a ton of trees coming down and some prep work being done for that.
So Valley Road, which is pretty much on the Maryland-Delaware border, the House District between Barksdale and maybe Church Road, is closing at the culvert, which is near Briar Creek and Briar Creek North. It's closing on Monday for, brace yourself, 6 weeks. That is a very well-traveled little road. If you live on any of the communities around there, you drive it a lot. So I'm sure, I'm positive that there are signs that they're warning you about it. There's been some emails going out to the various communities. But again, Valley at that creek, at that culvert there, downhill from Briar Creek, will be closed starting Monday for about 6 weeks. We knew that was part of the planning for the Briar Creek North community across the street from Briar Creek. They're upgrading. I think the developer is paying for the upgrade of that culvert, which otherwise was in jeopardy of collapsing. So ultimately, it's good news, but it's going to be 6 weeks of bad news if you live in that area. So be aware of that, and go with that. Let's see, what else are we have going on? We have to say we've got a whole lot of legislation going through, and since we're in a Dover week and a Dover week coming up, I think that's in. I know it's sort of overwhelming my head these days, ready to explode. And it's just, we've got, I think really the first year of every session, we've got the energy of the freshmen with all the things that, they want to do. They've been just, ready to go for so long. And now, we've released them onto the playing field. So we've got great energy, great collaboration going on in both chambers. And I think we're going to get a lot done by this June 30th. And it's a 2-year session. So some of these will take more than 1 year. We've got several. I know that we often hear from Dan Cedor from Aetna, Hosock, and Ladder. We've got some efforts underway to try to assist the fire companies across the state, all of which are facing financial challenges with the world they operate in, where they just don't have the volunteers they had 10 and 20 and 30 years ago. And with the requirements that we have as far as response times and such. So that's a piece I'm working. I've got as Emmy will say, I've got a long list of bills. We have no idea how many are going to come out of the pipeline and go through the successfully through the whole process. But a lot of irons in the fire. We'll see how many come out and turn into a finished product. But that's the nature of legislating. But I really do want to emphasize, and I think Senator Sokola mentioned this as far as reaching out to us. Potholes, if you see something, don't hesitate to reach out to us. In most cases, I say you can reach out and report a pothole to DelDOT and it will get fixed. But if you reach out to us and share a pothole and we get it to DelDOT, it'll get fixed probably faster. So there's my cat. So don't hesitate to reach out for anything. You have a question, don't worry that there's no stupid questions. There's no silly questions. Please reach out. It's our job to field your questions, your concerns, and to try to help you out with that. So next, let me pull up my calendar. So next month, the second Wednesday is the 12th. So that's when we'll have our next in-person constituent coffee at the Deer Park. Just to give you a heads up of that, also 7:30 to 9. So I'm going to just keep bouncing back and forth. Cyndie, do you have anything else you wanted to chat about? Tapped you out.
Exactly.
Senator Sokola. You're good? Well, I don't think there's a downside to ending early. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Emmy, thank you so much for your support during this call. Everyone, thank you for your comments, your questions. Really appreciate that. Please don't hesitate to utilize the resources at the Sierra Club. to field any questions that may come up when you hear information or in some cases disinformation about the ACC program. Great resources there, great fact checking there, and we're going to keep making sure that we work on fact-based policy. Sometimes as far as public service coming to Newark, we do not. I did not invite. I'm sorry. I'm reading Pam's comment. I do not have a way of seeing everyone who's online and inviting them in with this technology. The one thing I'll say is this does provide a bus service. I'll get to that in a sec. We do. This is something that I can save off and load up to YouTube and provide a link in Facebook for those who aren't on Facebook. If you want to look at this later, share this with anyone. Pam, as far as the bus service, indeed, the city of Newark has proposed a change from the Unicity set route system to an as-needed call-up, an app, sort of like a Lyft Uber system for bus service throughout the city of Newark. It's not yet live. I think it starts this summer. So there's probably information on the city's website, which is my way of stalling as I try to pull up the city's website. So I'm going to post not something on Unicity, but rather just the city's website and the resident subpage of it in the comments. Get some. We'll still get some hostile, even though new bills passed. And Lou, I am so sorry. So Lou is active in the Aetna Fire Company also, and he points out that state employees who are volunteer firefighters can still get hostile work environment situations even with the new bills passed. There are a lot of bills aimed to encourage volunteer firefighters. It's a rounding error compared to all that they sacrifice and they give, and all the costs to the fire companies. But we in the legislature have done many steps there, and Lou points out there's still can be notable barriers with employers, including the state of Delaware. So we can keep that conversation going. I want to mention there are school district board member elections in May, and I think it's is it vote411.org? Does that sound right? Where the legal women voters will have information on all the candidates. Christina School District, where the entire we'll get to Leo Ward in a sec, Glenn. The Christina School District, all the 23rd district is within that. Cyndie, I'm imagining you have both Christina and Appoquinimec in your district. Is that correct or not?
No, I don't have Appo. Okay.
So Christina has, I believe, at least it has 2 contested races, and I always like that when voters have a choice. While the candidates have to live within a specific sub-district of the school district, any resident, any voter in Christina School District can vote for each of those contested positions. So please learn more about the candidates. It's taking a little longer. We passed a bill to make sure that our candidates for school boards have to go through criminal background checks. That process takes an extra about 2 weeks. So we've got this little no man's land between when you file and when your name gets published on the Department of Elections site. We're drafting legislation to speed that up. So that's something where it's not uncommon when we pass legislation that there's an unintended consequence or two that we go and try to patch up. Glenn asked about the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights progress. We've had bills for reform of Delaware's Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights that was introduced last session, didn't get turned into law. There's still efforts to look at that, perhaps in pieces. So it's still in the development phase, has not been released out in a form to share. Senator Sokola, do you have anything to add on that piece? You're good.
I think you did fine with it.
Okay, very good. Sorry, the Retiree Health Benefits Advisory Subcommittee. So I was named to that by the speaker. Senator Sokola has named 2 senators and 1 or 2 retirees to that. And is it Trey Pardee and Dave Lawson, or who are your? Oh no, it's Brian Townsend.
Brian Townsend and Brian Pettyjohn.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so Brian's made it on for the Senate. So we've had the first meeting this past Monday. Our next meeting during this call, I found, is likely going to be 10 a.m. next Thursday. That advisory subcommittee is under the SEBC, State Employee Benefits Committee, and we'll be reviewing lots of options and coming up with recommendations on how the state should proceed for health benefits for our retirees. That, I'll say, blew up in our faces last year. So we're trying to approach this in a much broader way, a much more inclusive way, and a much more thorough. I don't mean to say the last attempt was not thorough, but we're going to look very intentionally at a wider range of steps that we can consider that will help to address a multi-billion-dollar shortfall in that program. As I say, that shortfall grew over decades, and to address it, it's going to take decades, but we need to set the path now. So that committee is responsible to share status and recommendations with the governor and the General Assembly by May 1st. Again, our next meeting is likely going to be announced today as being 10 a.m. next Thursday. So with that, final word, Cyndie?
No, same thing. Reach out to us if you need anything. Join your homeowners association for their annual meetings. And that's another great way to reach out to us. And follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletters. It's a great way to just kind of scroll through and see what we're up to and where we could use your help, and a great way for you to let us know about some concerns you have.
And Cyndie, the date of your next coffee is when? Date and time?
It is March 28th.
Very good. At what? 8 o'clock, right?
8 o'clock at the food bank. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Senator Sokola, any final words?
That's good. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Paul, for setting this up. And please get your leg well.
I'm alive and kicking. Not really kicking, but moving around. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great week, and look forward to seeing you in person next month.
Thank you.